Namaskar, and in this session we shall review another book titled Annam Bahu Kurvita. The title means that there is abundance of food prepared and ready to be served. Annam Bahu Kurvita is already prepared and available for consumption. This book was written by two authors, Dr. J.K. Bajaj and M.D. Srinivas. Book was written in 1996 and was published by the authors themselves under the Center for Policy Studies. The Center for Policy Studies is an organization based in Chennai. It is originally inspired by the thoughts of Sri Dharampal, whose books we have seen, several of them we have seen during the earlier Jignasa sessions. Both Dr. Bajaj and M.D. Srinivas are great admirers, we can say disciples of Sri Dharampal. So this book explores the tradition of Annadana, acquisition and distribution, generation of wealth and distribution. Here, more than the wealth, it is a food, which is in our tradition, a very strong point in our tradition, as we shall see in this book. And I have split it into two parts. The first part we will see the earlier traditions, that is the Puranas, as well as our epics, Ramayana and Mahabharata. And in the second part, we shall see the historical traditions of our country on Annadana, the Chatrams and other things. So we'll begin from the beginning. The Vedas are very insistent on Annadana. In fact, in the Taittiriya Upanishad, there is a lot of stress on this Annadana, and you can see Annam Brahmeti Vejanat. He says that the sage has known that Anna is Brahman, or Brahman is manifesting as Annam. In fact, it is treated as in the first manifestation of Brahman as creation. The first level is as food. And from food, everything else was born. And into food, everything will finally submerge. Let me read what the Taittiriya Upanishad says. He has known Anna as Brahman. Annam Brahmeti Vajanat. Annadjeva Khalvimani Bhutani Jayante. All create out of Anna. Annena Jatani Jivanti. Having born, they sustain themselves through Anna. Annam Prayanti Abhisamvishanti Iti. And ultimately, they end up merging themselves in Anna. They return to Anna. That is what the Upanishad says. The same Upanishad continues, it says, Annam Bahukurvita Tad Vratam. The title of this book is picked from here. Thou shalt prepare and serve abundant food. That is thy commandment unto labor. There are other details, but the essential part of the message is that you have to procure, prepare, and serve Annam with great sincerity. And this is a foundational statement of Indian culture. In the Bhavishya Purana, there is an instance where Yudhishthira asks Krishna, what should he do to overcome his sorrow. And Krishna answers this. He says, Dadaswannam, Dadaswannam, Dadaswannam Yudhishthira. Give food, give food, give food, O Yudhishthira. And the lower statement is a quotation from a critical evaluation of this book by well-known journalist M.V. Kamath. He reviewed this book in 1996, and this is what he had to say. The production of food and its even distribution amongst all, the giving of dana, considered as the supreme yajna, have been themes frequently discussed in our ancient religious texts, including the Taittiriya Upanishad, the Shatapatha Brahmana. Shatapatha Brahmana is a commentary in the Shukla Yajurveda. It's a commentary by Yajnavalkya. The Vishnu Purana, the Agni Purana, the Bhavishya Purana, Yajnavalkya Smriti, and Rigveda Samhita, the epics Ramayana and Mahabharata, right down to Manimekhalai, which is a Tamil epic. The basic theme in all these is what the title of this book says, Annam Bahukurvita Tad Vratam. That is the inviolable discipline of mankind. It's a mandate given by our scriptures. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna makes a statement, Aham Vaishwanaro Bhutva Praninam Deham Ashritaha Pranapana Samayukta Pachamyannam Chaturvidham. He says, it is I who reside in the body of beings and consume and digest 4 types of food. The 4 types are called the Bhakshyam, Bhojyam, Lehyam, and Choshyam. The different kinds of food. The one which is chewed and swallowed, that is Bhakshyam. The one which is to be drunk, that is Bhojyam. The one which is to be licked is Lehyam. One is to be sucked is called Choshyam. Says, I am the fire, I am the Vaishwanara Agni who sits in the stomach of beings, abiding in the body of beings. Jataragni. I am Vaishwanarova, governing the 5-fold life forces, that is Pranapana Samayuktam, digesting the 4-fold food. It is this basic tenet which is behind the tradition of Annadanam. Annadanam is done with a great respect. It is never to be indifferent. It has to be done with great respect and sincerity. That's what the Bhagavad Gita says. Later on, you will find that Vyasa repeating the same thing. Yajna dana tapah karma. In fact, Krishna says that yajna, dana, and tapas, these 3 disciplines are very essential even for the sages. Manishina says. Worship, charity. Yajna means worship. It is a generic term which includes yaga, which includes havana, which includes kratu, which includes worship, puja. That is called yajna. Dana is charity, and tapaha is austerity. Austerity would mean here both restraint, that is moderation, and meditation, are not to be abandoned ever, but to be performed with diligence. Worship, charity, and austerity, these are purifiers necessary even for the wise. And we are focusing in this book, we are focusing on Danam especially Annadanam. And the Ramayana describes Ramarajya right at the beginning of Ramayana. There's an encounter between Valmiki and Narada. That's how Ramayana begins. Sage Narada pays a visit to Valmiki. He has an agenda, he has a purpose for that visit. That is to prompt Valmiki to write Ramayana. So Narada visits Valmiki in his ashrama, and then after the initial welcoming, they both sit together for a discussion. And then Valmiki asks Narada, can you tell me who is the greatest king today? Konvaspin Sampratam Loke. Today, in the Vartamana time, in the present time, who is the great king? Who is Dharmajnascha, Kritajnascha, Satyavakyo Dhadavrataha? Then Narada says, it is difficult to identify such a person, but yet there is one right now ruling in Ayodhya. His name is Rama. And after that, he describes the Ramarajya. And in that, one of the main points that he makes is that in the cities or in the villages, there is wealth and there is food. He says the cities and provinces are replete with wealth and food supplies. All citizens were happy, like in Krita Yuga, the first Yuga, where there was no want, there was no shortages of anything, and people were happy. So he says Ramarajya has taken the Treta Yuga into Krita Yuga. And food was in abundance in the Ramarajya. Now the Indian social organization is based on the concept of sharing. That is the major point which the authors make in this book. They say Indian polity means the social organizations. Polity is what the society creates its own institutions for resolving its own problems. That is called polity. So the Indian polity is based on the principle of sharing. Let me read. Indians have always considered growing a plenty of food and sharing it in plenty with others as the primary attribute of human living. Food and sharing of food, Anna and Annadana, are the foundation of our culture. All else, even the search for moksha, the ultimate state of liberation that Indians are taught always to strive for, is built on this foundation. Food is foundational. And in the historical times, people have always noted this. When people came from outside, they have noted this and recorded in during so many centuries. This is M.V. Kamath in his review. He says, early European observers and British administrators in India repeatedly came across the Indian habit of offering food and hospitality to all those who happened to come to their door or the village. Europeans like Abbé Dubois, the French missionary who arrived in India in 1792 and spent 31 years enjoying the fabled Indian hospitality in the villages of Mysore, have written in deprecating terms of Indian customs and manners, but they are pretty unanimous on one thing: the hospitality offered by Indians to strangers, rich and poor alike. They have other issues. This missionary, Abed Du Bois, he tried to convert people and he commented very adversely on the traditions in India. But on one thing he was not, he was very complimentary, was that Indian hospitality, which he enjoyed for 31 years. The Center for Policy Studies is an institute for research and study aimed at comprehending and cherishing the essential civilizational genius of India and to help formulate a polity that would allow the Indian genius to flourish and assert itself in the present day world. There is a website, I have quoted the reference at the end, and they have published several books and articles. We can download and read them, or you can buy the books, but they have made a provision that you can just read it online. Highly researched, very in-depth research has been carried out, and then books were written on chosen themes. This is M.V. Kamath again. Comparing Indian data with that relating to British agriculture, a British economist found as early as 1804 that the productivity in India was several times higher than Britain. What surprised the economist was was the finding that the wages of the Indian agricultural laborer in real terms were substantially higher than those of his counterpart in Britain. Even under the most tyrannical ruler, the agriculturist was spared until the British arrived. It is generally accepted today that even during the reign of Aurangzeb, the maximum revenue receipts never exceeded 20% of the gross income of the agriculturist. What the British did was to dismantle the entire fiscal and revenue systems. They demanded that the state should get 50% of the gross produce after it was converted into money and made into regular tax dues, which they could easily take to their homeland, England. India today suffers from an extreme scarcity of food. This book was written in 96 and the statement refers to 1996. Because today it doesn't suffer extreme scarcity of food. We have seen that in the most recent pandemic time, the Indian government had made arrangements to feed something like 80 crores of Indian public for about 8 months. So it doesn't suffer the scarcity of food now, but even in 1996, that is nearly 50 years after freedom, India was still suffering scarcity of food. And I do remember as a child in 1965-66, the Prime Minister of the country gave a call that we are suffering food shortage. You fast 1 meal per week. Reduce your consumption. This is 1965-66 period. For almost 200 years, average availability of food grains for human consumption in India has remained below 200 kg per capita per year. It is roughly about 550 grams of rice per day per person, which the British administrators considered to be the minimal requirement for averting famines. So it remained on the border. Sometimes it would go below the border, Sometimes it would go high above the border. But whenever it went to the below the border, there were famines in the country. And we have seen earlier that during the British period, there were not less than 24 famines in 200 years. The country, it seemed, reached a state of near famine within a few decades of the coming of the British, that is 1770s. And we have remained in that state ever since. Most countries of the world today have access to at least twice the amount of basic foods. And in the relatively affluent countries, average supply of food grains and roots per capita, is as high as 4 to 5 times that of ours. The tradition. In this book, we have tried, that the author is saying, we have tried to bring together some glimpses of the intensity with which India of food. For this discourse on Anna and Annadana, we have relied largely on the highly regarded texts of Indian civilizational identity, the Shruti, Smriti, Itihasa, Purana, and Dharma Shastra. We also hope that at least parts of this book shall be found useful by some to teach their children about what it means to be an Indian and about the greatness and responsibility that this identity bestows upon them. The overall point it makes is that to grow more food, it is very essential that you do Annadana. Annadana is closely linked with the quantity of food that is grown and the kind of response you receive from creation. It is necessary to keep this tradition up. And Indian tradition invariably insists on that. The Raja Dharma, this is again another commentator who reviewed this book from another journal, Times of India. Most lucid elaborations of Raja Dharma are those contained in the Mahabharata. It is the responsibility of the king to ensure food for all. Bhishma asked Yudhishthira in the Shanti Parva, have you ensured that the cultivators are not reduced to deserting the country because of the exactions imposed by you? Always arrange for the welfare and livelihood of those who have no resources, those who have no one to look after them, those who are afflicted by old age, and those who have lost their husbands. This is the concept of the welfare state in the Mahabharata and the earlier scriptures. Please note the statement that Bhishma asked this question, have you ensured that the cultivators are not reduced to deserting the country? In fact, what we saw during the British period was exactly that. That is the importance of independence. The discourse, that is Raja Dharma Anushasana of Bhishma to Yudhishthira, which constitutes about 25,000 verses and forms nearly a quarter of the epic. The whole of Mahabharata, including the 18 Parvas, are said to be about 108,000 verses. About 1/4 of that is this single, what do you call, the discourse by Bhishma on how a king should conduct himself. In fact, all our scriptures insist greatly on the king being righteous. Because if the king is righteous, the citizens will be righteous. So Bhishma goes to a very deep discussion into the depth of the necessity of why a king has to be very righteous. So it runs into about 25,000 verses and forms nearly a quarter of the epic Mahabharata. Long afterwards, after Bhishma himself was gone and Yudhishthira performs the Ashwamedha Yajna, the latter asked Sri Krishna to sum up the essence of Bhishma's teachings. It so happens that Yudhishthira was taken to Bhishma for this discourse by Krishna, and Krishna was present throughout. And after the idea was that Yudhishthira was deeply grief-stricken. He was deeply distressed by the consequence of the war which he conducted and the killing of his brethren. He was deeply affected by that. He was under a great depression. So Krishna takes him, remind him of his duties. After the discourse is over, Yudhishthira did not recover. Then he goes back to Krishna and asks certain questions, and Krishna advises him. That was not enough. He went to Vedavyasa, and Vyasa also advises him that he should take up his duties and conduct himself, apply himself to the duties rather than grieving like this. So when he went to Krishna and asked him to sum up what did Bhishma say in the 25,000 verses, Raja Dharma and Shasana, Krishna does it in just about 15 verses. The first 10 of which lay down the centrality of Annadana. All that Bhishma said is this. He says about Annadana. 10 verses. The giving of food in the life of a householder. And the next 5 verses celebrate the greatness of food, its emergence out of the vital essence of the earth and with all life. I have quoted these 10 verses so that we get a picture of what is the Raja Dharmanushasana about. So Yudhishthira asks, the illustrious Bhishma Pitamaha has discoursed at great length on the secret of Dharma and Adharma. O Lord, kindly help me to grasp the essence of the entire teaching of Bhishma. And Bhagavan responds, Annena dharyate sarvam. He said, the world, both animate and inanimate, is sustained by food. This is what the Upanishad also says. Life arises from food. This is observed all round, and there can be no doubt about it. You leave food somewhere, allow it for a day or two, you would see life emerging from that food. So, annena dharyate sarvam. And it is food that sustains life. It is a food into which life finally descends or merges. Krishna says, one who wishes to attain well-being in this world and beyond should offer food to all who seek. One should give food in accordance with time and place and should keep giving to the limits of one's capacity, even if it were to cause inconvenience to one's own family. He says kalatram. Kalatra means wife. Even if it inconveniences your family members, your wife, you should still offer food and you should not turn a person away. Goes on Sri Krishna, finding an old person, a child, a tired traveler, or a venerable one at the door, venerable sage at one's door, a householder should offer him worshipful hospitality. Atiti Devo Bhava. With gladness in his heart, and he would to his own teacher, as he would do to his own teacher. Continues. Desirous of well-being beyond this world, the householder should purge himself of all anger, all jealousy, and offer worshipful hospitality. With grace and courtesy to the one who appears at the door. Never offer slight to a person appearing at your door. Never let a falsehood escape from your lips in his presence. And never even ask him about his lineage or learning, but offer him hospitality. Goes to the extent of saying, the one who appears at your door at the proper time of lunch or dinner, even if he were an outcast, Chandalo va, Shapako va, whether he is a Chandala or the one who partakes the flesh of a dog, deserves to be worshipped with the offering of food by him who seeks well-being beyond this world. O Yudhishthira, the one who shuts his door on all comers and indulges in the enjoyment of food for himself alone is certainly ensuring that the doors of heaven shall be shut upon him. As you shut the door on the stranger, the door of heaven will be shut upon you. And his virtue is indeed great, who propitiates with food the ancestors, the gods, the sages, the venerable ones, the destitute, and all those who appear at his door. The one who gives food to those who seek, and especially to the Brahmana seekers, is rid of all sins, even if his sins were immense. The giver of food is the giver of life, and indeed of everything else. Therefore, one who is desirous of well-being in this world and beyond should especially endeavor to give food. And lastly, food is indeed the preserver of life, and food is the source of procreation. When there is no food, the 5 elements constituting the body cease to be. This, in a sense, is at the back of our tradition. And all of us are aware that any festival, any function, the consummates in a feast. And this feast is a respectful offering to the guest who he represents a god, represents God. Let us look at the Puranas. In the Varaha Purana, Sri Varaha tells Dharini is earth, the story of King Shweta. Upon seeking his advice, sage Vasishtha tells King Shweta. This story of Shweta appears in several Puranas. It appears in Varaha Purana, it appears in Bhavishya Purana also. Varaha tells Dharini the story of Shweta. And Shweta was a king who did tapasya and attained, went to the Brahmaloka, it is said. That is the seventh heaven. But yet he suffered the pangs of hunger even when he was in the heaven. That is the story. That is the crux of the story. He went to a higher heaven, but then yet he suffered pangs of hunger on a continuous basis. He went to Brahmadeva and asked, what is the reason for this? He said, you haven't given food to anybody. You gave several other things, but not the food. So that was the highlight of Shweta's story. And King Shweta meets Vasishtha in the heavens. And then he asks him, what is the remedy for this? That no amount of giving of, Vasishtha tells Shweta that no amount of giving of diverse riches in charity can substitute for the giving of food, says Vasishtha. This is what Vasishtha's words are. O king, give food. Giving food ensures well-being of the donor at all times. One who gives food gives all that is worth giving on the surface of the earth. Having given food, nothing remains ungiven. So the most important dhanam is said to be the annadhanam. Why is it most important? It is most important because this is one dhanam which can satisfy the guest, the person who accepts this dhanam can get satisfied. If you give him riches, it may or may not satisfy him. If you give him a sovereign, he may say, why not 2 sovereigns? If you give him land, he'll say, why not a little more? You give him a house, he'll say, why not 1 more? There is still space in his mind to receive something more. It is very difficult to satisfy a person by dhanam, except in the case of annadhanam. Therefore, annadhanam is considered to be the supreme dhanam, though qualitatively there are other things. For example, vidyadhanam is considered to be superior because it gives you a greater insight to lead your life. But annadhanam is considered important because it is something which is primary, it is there to sustain life, and secondly, it can satisfy the borrower. The one who accepts dhanam can get satisfied. So it directly satisfies the Lord sitting inside the stomach, Vaishwanara Agni, whereas the others may not. So Vasishtha tells Shweta that your suffering is because you never care to offer food, though you did give riches, wealth, land, clothes, and other charities. You treated annadhanam as trivial. That is the cause of your problem. King Shweta, says Sri Varaha, did not accept sage Vasishtha's advice. He thought that food was too insignificant an object to be worthy of giving at the hands of a great king like him. He therefore gave away precious jewels, expensive garments, priceless elephants, and flourishing cities. He conquered the earth, performed 1,000 Ashwamedha yajnas, and at the end of each gave away a variety of riches. But he never gave any food or water. In time, the great king Shweta died and was duly received into the heavens. But he continued to be afflicted by hunger and thirst there. One day he saw sage Vasishtha in the heavens and eagerly implored him to relieve him of this terrible fate. And sage Vasishtha went on to remind Shweta of the imperative of giving food which he had tried to impress upon him even earlier. He said, by giving away gold and precious stones, men come to enjoy great luxuries. But it is by giving food that they get complete satisfaction. And, O king, food is what you did not give, for you did not find it to be of any significance. The story of the great King Shweta being reduced to the eating of its own flesh. The story continues. He was in the heaven, but he was afflicted by the pangs of hunger, and he had to eat his own flesh. That's what the story says. Eating his own flesh, in fact, evokes the images of not someone who lacks in well-earned virtue, but of one who has committed a terrible transgression. This is the author saying, okay, he has not given food, but then what is the consequence? He had to eat his own flesh. This looks really terrible. So not giving a food is not just, it can be excused. It is a transgression of the basic law of nature. The mere act of living, according to the Indian understanding, involves partaking of the share of other components of the universe, which creates a debt not only towards other members of the human society, but towards the universe in general. Giving of food before eating is both a recognition and a partial repayment of that debt. Not recognizing and not attempting to repay that debt is a transgression that puts one outside the pale of the intricate relations of give and take on which the universe is structured. That is a basic analysis behind the Annadanam process. It is the inexorable consequence of violating what Indians regard to be the appropriate attitude towards food and its place in the universe. This attitude is enshrined in the most basic of Indian texts. The Taittiriya Upanishad advises in its resounding verse, na kanchana vasatau pratyachakshita tadvratam. Do not turn away anyone who comes to your door without offering him food and hospitality. That is the inviolable discipline of mankind. Tadvratam. Therefore, have a great abundance of food and exert all your efforts towards ensuring such abundance. And announce to the world that the food is ready to be partaken by all. That's what the Upanishad says. The Upanishad authoritatively lay down the inviolable principle that Anna is obtained strictly in the same measure in which it is given. See, this is an underlying point. This is an important point where it says, you will obtain in the same measure as you give. One who prepares and gives food in abundance with high care and veneration obtains food in abundance with high care and veneration. It is a law. One who prepares and gives food in a modest measure with modest care and veneration obtains food in modest measure and with modest care and veneration. And the one who prepares and gives food in a small measure with low care and veneration obtains food in small measure and with low care and veneration. He said, sow, you sow, so you will reap. Built around this principle, you will see in both the epics, Ramayana as well as Mahabharata. And the Annadanams are, of course, there are chatrams which will give daily Annadanam, but there are major events, functions, which are centered around the yajnas performed. Yajnas involve great Annadana. Annadana alone, without any other observance, may constitute a yajna. But there can be no great yajna without Annadana. This is true of our functions and festivals as well. What seems to be going on at Naimisharanya, 9 meters to the east of Ayodhya, that is where Sri Rama conducted his Ashwamedha. During that year of the Ashwamedha Yajna is a grand and unending feast under the competent, careful and enthusiastic direction of Sugriva and Vibhishana and their armies. Valmiki describes the scene of the Yajna and the feasting. Yajna and the feasting thus. Sage Vasishtha insists that everyone should come who comes to the Yajna grounds must be fed and fed in great dignity and with respect. He is particularly insistent that whatever is given to anyone must be offered with respect and without compromising the dignity of the receiver. And he expressly instructs all those connected with the various arrangements of the yajna that natu lilaya, satkritya natu lilaya, should not be slighted. Food should be offered with all ceremony and honor. Datavyam annam vidhivat satkritya natu lilaya. With all ceremony and honor. Serving of food should never be undertaken with an attitude of indifference. It should be done with such care that people of all varnas feel revered and honored. When those assigned to various tasks come back and to report the completion of arrangements for the yajna, Sage Vasishtha once again cautions them that never give anything to anyone with indifference or contempt. Never affect such indifference or contempt even in playfulness. Indifference or contempt shown towards the receiver destroys the giver. There can be no doubt about that. Natra samshaya. Hanyad dataram natra samshaya. Avajnaya kritam. Hanyad dataram natra samshaya. It destroys the giver. It describes the yajna. The proceeds of the great yajna of Sri Rama. There is only one cry that keeps rising again and again. Serve, serve, serve properly. And the servers keep serving till the guests are satisfied, satiated. In this foremost of the yajnas of Mahatma Sri Rama, a great variety of food is being served, including numerous kinds of sweetmeats prepared especially for the occasion. The armies of Vanaras and Rakshasas rush to fulfill even the unexpressed desires of the guests. Before the guests can open their mouths to ask for what they want, the Vanaras and Rakshasas are there to do them. And as a consequence, he says, the creation is bountiful on Sri Rama and his kingdom. While Sri Rama presides over the Rajya, it rains at the proper time. Kale varshanti parjanyaha. Kale varshati parjanyaha. There is an abundance of food and an air of clean freshness all round. The capital city and the diverse regions are thickly peopled with multitudes of healthy, cheerful, and well-fed people. Nobody dies an untimely death, and no living being suffers from any disease. And nothing happens in it. And Mahabharata also endorses this viewpoint and insists on the same approach. During the Mahabharata, there are two great yajnas were conducted, both by Yudhishthira. One when he was in Indraprastha, after the partition of their kingdom. They set up their capital in Indraprastha, and then they conducted the Rajasuya Yajna. And another, and Yudhishthira was enthroned as the king of Hastinapura. Then he undertakes Ashwamedha Yajna to re-establish. Both of them are meant for establishing what you call as Chakradhipatya. He became a Chakravarti because in the Rajasuya Dwara, all the kings have to come and bow before him. That is the expectation. The kings who accept and come, they accept the hegemony and superiority of the Kartru, that Rajasuya Kartru, that is Yudhishthira. So he established his preeminence in the whole of Aryavarta. Both times it was the same purpose. In Ashwamedha Yajna, they allow a horse to roam around, and anybody who want to challenge the primacy of the king will have to tie the horse and give them battle. And it is said that Arjuna went behind the horse, and at every step he had to fight. People did not accept his hegemony, primarily because they were all aggrieved because of the Kurukshetra war, during which many of their elders had died. So the youngsters were angry with the Pandavas, and Arjuna had an uphill task in conquering those small kingdoms across the Bharatavarsha. It is said that by the end of Ashwamedha Yajna, Arjuna, coming back at the end of a year, was very tired and fatigued. And he gives a message to Yudhishthira to take every care that no invitee, no king who has come to attend the yajna should get irritated, or a situation where, like Shishupala did during the Rajasuya, don't create any scene, take every care not to provoke them. Arjuna was tired, fatigued. Okay. So this is during the Rajasuya Yajna of Yudhishthira. The story is the same. All were honored with plentiful fulfillment of all their desires. People everywhere were satiated. Precious stones were being given away all round. Serve them, keep serving. And please partake of food, please eat. Such are the sounds that were being heard continuously in this yajna. Diyatam, diyatam esham, pujyatam, bhujyatamiti. Evam prakara sanjalpa shruyate smatra nityashaha. And Ashwamedha Yajna was taken up by Yudhishthira at the advice of Vedavyasa. He says that to overcome your sorrow, your depression, you should engage yourself in a very productive activity. And the activity he suggested was that you conduct Ashwamedha Yajna and do that Yajna for 1 full year. And that will pull you out of your depression. And needless to say that it is accompanied by great Annadana. O Yudhishthira, if you still believe that you are responsible for the unrighteous conduct of the war, those sins can be washed away by tapas, yajna, and dhanam, he says. There is the same thing which Krishna voices in the Bhagavad Gita. Tapas, yajna, and dana are essential even for manishis, even so. The sages. It was performed by your own great ancestors, King Bharata, the son of Dushyanta and Shakuntala, who ruled the earth with great prowess. At the end of Yudhishthira's Ashwamedha Yajna, this is the story which highlights the importance of sincerity of purpose in all the actions that we do. Yudhishthira's Yajna was greatly successful. Thousands and thousands of people partook in the Yajna, were greatly satisfied, and they went back. And all across Bharatavarsa, people started praising Yudhishthira for the conduct of Yajna, the manner in which it was conducted. But it's at that time, a mongoose appears. It is said that the mongoose was partly its face, its head, and part of his body had turned golden. And it came and it gave a big, big cry. And everybody started looking at it. Then it started speaking with a human voice. And it said, the mongoose gets up, lets off a fierce growl, and then adopting a human voice says, O kings of the earth, this great yajna of yours has not yet equaled the one single measure of roasted grain given away by a generous resident of Kurukshetra. The mongoose is coming from Kurukshetra. It said there was a family in Kurukshetra who did a great sacrifice. They were not rich, they were very poor. It is a family of 4, and they used to live by collecting grains which is left over after the harvest. But what they performed as Annadana was of much greater value and worth than this whole yajna, I said. Why? Because whatever was left out of that was sprinkled on the ground, and I went and rolled over that, and my body turned golden. In part, my body turned golden. I want to convert it into full. Therefore, I have come here thinking that this great Ashwamedha Yajna would have created a similar situation where I can complete the transformation of my body into a golden body. The rest of my body, which was not converted there because what was sprinkled on the ground was very little. So whatever touched my body, that part has become golden. But it was not adequate. So I was in search of finding locations where great Annadana is done so that I can transform entirely. But it has not happened here, says the mongoose. Therefore it says, O kings, this great yajna of yours has not yet equaled the one single measure of roasted grain given away by a generous resident of Kurukshetra, who himself used to live off the leftover grains collected from the harvested fields and marketplaces. A Brahmana living in Kurukshetra made his living by unchavritti. Unchavritti means gathering of leftover grain from the harvested field and marketplaces. Like a pigeon, he would painstakingly collect his food, grain by grain, and nurture his whole family, comprising of his wife, son, and daughter-in-law. And then there was a time when there was a terrible famine. The crops in the fields dried up. There were no grains to be collected from anywhere. They were reduced to a total destitution. After several days of starvation, one day they were able to gather one measure of barley. They brought it home, roasted and pounded the grain, and prepared for their long-awaited meal. They performed the proper ablutions and made their offering to the fire. And only then did they divide the roasted and pounded grain into 4 quarters and sit down to partake of that austere meal. But then, before they could begin eating, there appeared a Brahmin guest on the door. Hungry though they were, the sight of a guest, their dharma prompted them, and they invited the guest and offered him hospitality. The guest seemed to be very hungry. So the Brahmin, the host Brahmin, offered his part of their meal to the guest. But the guest was not satisfied. Then his wife offered her share. He was still not satisfied. Then the son offered, and then the daughter-in-law gave her share. He ate all of that. There was nothing left for the host. It is then they realized that the guest was none other than Dharma, that is Yamadharma himself. I do not know whether there is an underlying meaning for this story, because Yamadharma has come and eventually they died. Did Yama come to take them? Eventually they died and they were taken to the heavens. The guest was satisfied, and the guest was Dharma himself, who had appeared in human form to test the depth of the Brahmana's commitment to Dharma. And this family passed that test. And whatever the grain of barley which was roasted and pounded and was offered to the guest, whatever the remains of that was sprinkled on the earth. And this mongoose went and rolled over that, and part of his body turned golden. Now the mongoose says, I have come here to the Yajnashala of the great Yudhishthira to see whether the rest of my body also would turn to gold by rolling here. And he said, alas, it has not. The purport, the meaning of the story is clear, that whatever you offer has to be offered with great sincerity. It is not external. it is internal. This refrain we often see in our Dharma Shastras, that Dharma is that which satisfies your own conscience. In the event of a doubt, it is your conscience is your guide. It has to satisfy your conscience, then it is Dharma. In other words, it is the sincerity with which you offer that makes it real Dharma. That is the end of part 1. So I will stop here now, and if there is any comments today, we can hear. In the next part, we will take up what the historical development is and certain examples of that from the same book. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. So now the session is open for question and answers.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Which is not related to our dharma or religion, but in other religions, say this Christian, Mohammedan, Jews we don't know, Parsis also we know, they offer food. But in other religions, I have not seen offering the food to their someone who has come to their place or something like that, which you may see in the northern India, say Sikhs and other Punjabis, they do a lot of langars. In Jaina temples, they have got this ambil and all that. There also you get food, but they don't donate it. They take it with some payment and other things and all that. So what are the implications can have in their way of living or way of giving, or I don't say what is the benefit of that, but how they get the result in their lives in that.
This is difficult to answer question, but in part, see, offering a feast at the end of a function is there in almost all communities. Intuitively, people feel that offering food is a very noble thing. Offering to destitutes as a support is also there in other societies. They have their charity issues, but they might have not developed into a finer philosophy like the Vedas did. Whether they're very explicit, clearly understood. See, in the Vedas, what we say is that, in India, what we say is that offering food is punyam, and it will also generate wealth for you. It will give you a similar treatment. Others will give you similar treatment if you offer food with a good heart. So this kind of a philosophical development may not be there in other religions. I do not know. But intuitively, offering food is considered to be good in most societies.
It is naturally, it is a simple way of, or the principle of energy.
Yes.
Whatever energy you give or circulate,
yes,
similar it comes down back to you. Similar energy.
Yeah. What you give, you start getting similar treatment.
Yes,
similar.
that is.
Yeah. This principle is well enshrined in the Vedas. Whereas other religion may not, I do not know. I cannot comment on that. But intuitively they do feel. Feasts are there in almost all societies.
Maybe because major of us are vegans.
Huh.
While in other religions, they
Yeah.
They eat quite a lot of non-veg things and all that. But you see, during the Ramzan, Muslims get together and sit together with the friends and they share their foods and other things.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That is what we see.
Yeah.
But while in other, say, Gurudwaras, they always give langars and foods and all that. There are quite a lot of places in India and in Gujarat, I know. Every day there is a langar, thousands of people are eating over there, coming there. There are saints, travelers, and there's so many places all over India.
Yeah.
That is what mostly I have seen our Hindu culture or Hindu peoples are there.
Yeah. In the next session, we will see some examples of our own traditions historically, from the historical perspective, not from the Puranic perspective, but from the historical perspective, how these things are taken up and how the kings and others used to arrange for these things. In fact, until 200-300 years ago, in India, food was not charged. There was no culture of hotel industry. There was no concept of a hotel industry. There are Anna Chatrams. So if you go to Himalayas even today, there are Anna Chatram. There you can go and eat.
Yes.
But in the rest of the country also, right in the south also, or I should say throughout the country, there were Anna Chatram. Travelers would eat in the Chatrams and Chatrams were free. There was no payment for that. That is one. Secondly, see, Annadanam is, I come from the coastal Karnataka, and in the coastal Karnataka, there are several temples. Dharmasthala, Subramanya, Kollur Mukambika, Katil Durga Parameshwari. There are several, I can name several of these temples, Madhuru, so many places. Annadanam in the temple is very normal. Lunchtime, you can go and eat in the temple. It is free. It is free. And the experience is that, see, earlier there used to be only a few temples. I told you, passing through the British times, many of these things had stopped because the whole country became very poor. But then it started picking up in the post-independent era, and newer centers, newer temples started restarting this process of Annadanam in the temples. Initially, they were hesitant. Will it really sustain? Can we give food every day for 365 days of the year? Can we sustain that? But then the experience shows that they could sustain it. There is no doubt about that. Wherever they have started, they have not stopped because of any reason.
Yes.
Yeah. So this tradition of Annadanam is a very live tradition in India, which dried up during the British time. That is true. And it happened for so many things. The king was not supporting that, then it happens that it dries up. But today it is not the case. Today in India there is adequate food. The most recent example is during the pandemic, the government of India supported 80 crores of our citizens with food.
Yes.
8 months. So it is not an ordinary. I think this affluent, this is what the meaning of affluence is. India is affluent today. I mean, it has crossed that stage of poor nation.
There is one more example I can give. There is you might have seen in Karnataka or anywhere while traveling or going, any Gujarati shop is there. Maybe name have the Jalaram store or Jalaram, something like that. He was in Lohana Sant from Veerpur near Rajkot. So he used to do Bandara every day in the sense all year round. After his passing away, his children continued it. And so many things used to come in donation, food, grain, this, that. But now the things they have collected so much of the things or money they have got. So since last 15, 20 or 30 years, They are not accepting a single paisa or anything in their place. Wherever they are having Jalaram establishments there, one is near in Anandi, one is near in Virpur in Rajkot. Not a single penny. Even if you take any prasad or anything to offer to the deity or Jalaramji, then they will not take a single piece also. They will offer it there and return you complete thing. They don't take a single paisa, single rupee, no food, nothing. You come and take the Annadana. Whenever you are going there, it is always running there, something as you have to take it in the food they are offering. So this is one of the rarest example which I have seen. They are not taking any paisa from anybody. This is whatever money and collected we have got, it is more than enough, so we don't want anything more now.
Yeah, this maybe, I mean, I do not know, how do they really sustain? Do they not take anything from the devotees? Yes. But how do they sustain? How do they offer?
We have got enough money from the donation which we have received up till now. And through that only we are managing it.
Yeah.
And they are not even giving any interviews or anything. They don't want to come into the media.
Okay.
Who are their family members, who are their grandchildren and all that. They don't want to come out into the public. What they are doing, what they are, nothing.
So there is a place called Tumkur near Bangalore. Then there is a matha of I know it's called Siddhaganga Matha, which offers food and education to children to the tune of 5,000 children who stay in the matha and paying nothing. But they sustain by donations from the public. Not coercive collection, no. But donations contributed by the public on their own voluntary contributions. But they have been sustaining this approach, this process of educating and feeding children from the society, usually underprivileged children. But to the tune of, I think, 5,000 children stay in the matha.
It is a great thing.
Great. I have gone there and I have eaten the food that they offer. It is offered with such love.
Very good.
So these
even in our Saurashtra or Gujarat, Saurashtra is the Kathiawad or Saurashtra, what we say. There are every village or every now and then you come across such things there. They have got, you have to go, if you go to the math, then you can have your food and all that. Contribute your donation and all that. That's all. Nothing, no one will ask you for the donation even there.
Yeah.
Even one sant was there from Una, Div. Div is in Saurashtra, which was being governed by the Portuguese previously. So he had his establishment or his matha or his small place is there in Umargaon, near Gujarat, border of the Gujarat and Maharashtra. So when he came over there in Umargaon, at the place of his disciple, he asked one question: if I will come down, then you will have to fulfill one wish of mine. Okay, I will fulfill your wish. So whoever come to your place, you have to offer him food. Without food, you are not supposed to allow him to go. Yes.
Yeah.
And they are not taking any donation. They are not taking any donation, anything. Because I know that family since last, we are our neighbors. But they have established over there. They are doing their own work in Umargaon. But they devote their time and money, everything to that. Whoever comes there. At least 30, 40 people are coming every day over there.
Okay.
Minimum. During the festival, it goes like anything. Anyway, thanks a lot, Subarna ji.
Yeah.
Harinath ji.
Namaste, sir. Anyone else having any comments? Maybe one comment I want, rather two, sir, I wanted to add. One is this concept of when we are giving this dhanam, one thing we can observe is the taker, the person who takes the dhanam also takes it with respect, with reverence. with folded
Yes.
hands. And the person who gives also, after giving, he folds his hands and does the namaskaram. So because there is no concept of, I don't know, inferiority or superiority or something, right? Because the person who is giving is gaining. So he is thanking the person who is taking it.
Yes. Yeah.
That's
That's
Yes,
what
naturally.
that's what Sage Vasishtha insisted, that when you offer it with great respect.
right. That was one.
Yes, sir.
That was one thing to observe, because it is. Then the second point was about atithi. See, we use
Yeah.
the term atithi.
Yeah.
Tithi means time. Atithi means there is no time. So basically, he is defined as a person who can come to our house or to our place without any information at any odd time. And the concept was we need to take care of that person.
Yes.
So there are many stories which says when people have come in the midnight and so on, and but without food, and people have prepared food. That family prepares food and gives shelter to the person.
Yeah.
So I think there is no equivalent word for it in English. A guest is a different meaning. Guest is not atithi.
This is Atithi.
Atithi, correct.
Atithi.
We don't have equivalent word for guest in our language.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hello,
Yes.
Murli here.
Yes, Murali, please go
Yeah,
ahead.
hi.
Hi,
Yeah.
Murali.
Sir,
You can
thank
turn
you for
on the video if you don't mind. Yes, please.
no, I'm actually driving, so I thought I'll
No
talking on
issue.
the speaker phone in the car, so it's dark also. Okay. So, sir, thank you so much for a wonderful talk. I think we had all heard in the family that Annadana is Mahadana, but such a philosophical and tradition is there. I was not aware, so thank you for bringing that to light, and we'll look forward to your next part also.
Yeah.
My other observation was as children, when we heard this concept of Varanna in our homes, in our grandparents' homes,
Yeah.
where they would feed students.
Yeah.
And even if you read S.L. Bhairappa's novels also, he also talks about it and stuff like that. So I think like while you all gave examples of temples and mathas doing it, even at a home, I think there was this concept of you should feed any student who comes to you, and they should adopt those students, or it could be students or even young people. But I find that a great example of the same concept. Correct?
Yeah, I agree.
Where a family would extend the same thing with its own meager resources, would extend the same Annadana to students in their growing up years.
In our tradition, there are so many other things are there. We used to keep some portion of the food for the cows. We used to keep some portion of the food for the dogs also. We used to keep some portion of the grains for the crows, pigeons, crows, and other things also. So we used to do that when we used to stay there in the villages or somewhere where we can offer things. And we used to have the cows and other things at our place only, normally.
Yeah, supporting the animal world is also part of our culture. And there are 5 types of yajnas defined. In the next session, we will see them from this book. There are 5 yajnas which are defined for a grahastha. Bhuta yajna, what you are referring to is Bhuta yajna, I think. And sustaining the environment is Bhuta yajna. So animals as well as birds and other things to be sustained because it's an essential part of nature. There is a Manushya Yajna which is supporting the humans. The Varana is that Manushya Yajna. Whereas what Yogeshji mentioned is Bhuta Yajna. I mean, these are well defined in the tradition, in the Vedic tradition.
But there is a reason behind that. The cow and dogs, sheep and other animals are there, not domesticated.
I'm not able to hear.
The cow, dogs, and other animals like sheep, goats, they have got a very positive vibration which are supporting to the human being.
I'm not
That is why.
getting the audio.
So that is why we used to support them. I will explain it to Harinathji, because normal human being has an aura of nearly 10 to 12 feet, normal healthy human being. But I have measured the aura of the cow is on an average 30 feet. Everyone knows about the aura or whatever you may call it, Abha Mandal, which we call it in the Sanskrit, because it is very highly positive and which is very supporting and increasing enhancing the aura and working of the human being. That is why we used to believe cow is our mother. So that is all totally different topics that we'll talk sometime later. Anyway, thanks again, Subarnaji, for a very, very interesting lecture.
Welcome.
Harinath, I have a question for you. Sometimes you've, I think, posted the recordings of these past talks. Is there one place where all the talks are there, where we can?
Yeah. Murli, I will send you the link. It is called Jignasa Seminars. It's a channel, YouTube channel.
Oh, okay.
And that channel also has many playlists. All these things are getting organized as different playlists.
Oh, fantastic.
Yes, okay.
Fantastic. Because I have a couple of friends who are abroad. For them, the timing may not work out, but they may want to listen to the recorded thing. So they were asking, so I thought I'll share it.
Jignasa Seminars is the channel name. If they can subscribe to that, they will get the intimation automatically.
Fantastic. I'll do that. Yeah.
Okay,
Murali, we also have a web page where all these PPTs are stored.
Okay.
They're stored along with the videos, but you can refer to the PPT if you wish for details and other things, because most of these things are well referenced. So if you want to
absolutely
other things, go to the Jignasa blog at wordpress.com. Jignasa blog. All these videos are stored there, and PPTs are also accompanying those videos.
Sure. Thank you. That's a great resource. I'll go through it and also share it.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. So we'll come.
Okay, then. So shall we close, Hari?
Yes, sir. Let's close with Shanti Mantra.
Yeah, you will say the Shanti Mantra.
Sure, sir.
I will say, but I will mute.
Sure, sir.
So that there is no overlap. Okay.
Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Paschyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.